You know what destroys more dreams than failure? It isn't weakness. It isn't lack of talent. It isn't even bad luck. It's ego. The insidious voice that whispers, I already know enough. I don't need to change. I don't need to suffer. But life does not reward ego. Life rewards discipline. And the tragedy is this: most people never realize that the very thing they cling to, the fragile sense of self-importance, is what keeps them small. Ego seeks comfort. Discipline seeks growth. That's the eternal divide. And it plays out in your life every single day, whether you realize it or not. Ego whispers to you the same poisonous lee. You've done enough. You're smarter than the rest. You don't need to struggle anymore. It offers you a seductive escape from effort. It tells you to stay where you are, to bask in your own self-importance, to convince yourself that the world already owes you recognition. And in the moment, it feels good. It feels safe. Comfort always feels safe. But it is a trap, a gilded cage. Because nothing of substance, nothing of true meaning comes without discomfort. Discipline, on the other hand, doesn't care about your comfort. Discipline is indifferent to your feelings. Discipline asks, what do you want to become? What price are you willing to pay? And will you pay it every day, especially when no one is watching? That's the harsh difference. Ego demands reward first. Discipline demands work first. Think about the athlete who quits practice early because he already feels talented enough. His ego tells him he's above the grind, that his natural ability will carry him. But then he faces the one who stayed, the one who trained when he didn't want to, who pushed through the exhaustion, who embraced the boredom of repetition. And the truth becomes clear: talent without discipline is wasted. Ego led the first athlete into comfort, and comfort betrayed him. The second athlete, governed by discipline, found growth. This is the reality across every domain of life. The student who refuses to study because she thinks she's already smart enough, the entrepreneur who believes his initial success guarantees permanent victory, the individual who coasts on yesterday's effort, every single one of them eventually discovers that ego always collapses under pressure. Discipline, though, is not glamorous. It is boring, uncelebrated, often invisible. Discipline is waking up at 5 in the morning to train when the world is asleep. Discipline is reading the book when others are distracted by noise. Discipline is holding your tongue when your ego wants to lash out. Discipline is choosing the harder path again and again, not because it feels good, but because it forges strength. Growth doesn't come from comfort. Growth comes from friction, from resistance, from the unbearable weight you carry until your muscles adapt, your mind adapts, your spirit adapts. People want transformation, but they don't want the grind. Boo! Ego thrives in that gap. It promises growth without effort, change without sacrifice, reward without risk. But every person who has achieved something meaningful in life knows the same truth. Ego doesn't build you. It only blinds you. Discipline builds you brick by brick, habit by habit, sacrifice by sacrifice. There's a reason so many people stagnate. It's not because they lack opportunity. It's not because they lack intelligence. It's because they listen to ego instead of discipline. Ego says, you've worked hard enough today. Take it easy. Ego says, you deserve a break before you've earned one, daw. Ego says, if it feels uncomfortable, it must be wrong. But discipline understands something deeper, that the very discomfort you run from is the signal you're moving in the right direction. If it's hard, it matters. If it challenges you, it shapes you. If it stretches you, it changes you. The comfort zone is where ego thrives and growth dies. The discipline zone is where growth thrives and ego dies. You will never meet a strong person who had an easy past. You will never meet someone deeply wise, profoundly capable, and truly resilient who didn't endure the discipline of struggle. And yet, we're surrounded by people who want the shortcut, the hack, the easy path. They want to skip the grind. They want results without the process. That's ego talking, not reality. Reality bends to discipline, never to ego. The soldier who drills his movements until they are instinct survives in chaos. The surgeon who rehearses procedures until they are second nature saves lives under pressure. The artist who practices scales and techniques relentlessly unlocks beauty that ego could never dream into existence. Comfort would have robbed them all. Ego would have left them fragile. Discipline gave them mastery. So, when the choice appears, and it always does, you must recognize what's happening. Every time you feel the pull toward comfort, ask yourself, is this ego protecting me, or is this discipline shaping me? The answer determines whether you stay small or grow beyond what you imagined possible. Growth is never free. Comfort is always cheap. And the difference between the two will define the entire trajectory of your life. Ego says, I am great. Discipline says, I will become better. That single difference separates stagnation from transformation. Ego inflates your sense of identity. It convinces you that who you are right now is enough, that your worth is tied to being seen as important, powerful, intelligent, or talented. It offers the illusion of completeness without the reality of progress. But identity built on ego is fragile. It's a castle made of glass, beautiful to look at, but one stone, one failure, one criticism, and the whole thing shatters. Discipline, however, is not about preserving a fragile image of the self. Discipline builds character, and character is different from identity. Character is not about what others think of you. It's about what you repeatedly do, about the choices you make when no one is watching, about the actions that slowly, deliberately transform you into someone worthy of respect, including your own. Imagine the student who gets praised early in life for being gifted. Ego clings to that identity. I am smart. I am special, Bob. The student starts avoiding challenges, fearing that failure might reveal otherwise. The ego protects its inflated image, but it suffocates growth. Contrast that with the student guided by discipline. That student doesn't fixate on being seen as smart, but instead commits to working harder, studying longer, stretching further. Discipline builds a foundation not on praise, but on effort, not on the fragile illusion of being exceptional, but on the tangible strength of becoming competent. Over time, the first student collapses under the weight of their ego, while the second quietly forges resilience, depth, and mastery. The truth is that ego clings to recognition, but discipline clings to process. Ego craves validation now, but discipline invests in becoming tomorrow. This is why ego feels powerful, but is secretly weak. If someone insults the ego-driven person, they collapse because their entire worth was tied to image. The disciplined person doesn't break so easily because their self-respect is tied not to what others think, but to what they know they've earned through consistent effort. When your life is ruled by ego, every failure is a threat to your existence. When your life is ruled by discipline, failure is simply another step in the process of becoming. Think about this in terms of a craftsman. The ego-driven craftsman insists, I already know enough. My work is beyond critique. He may guard his pride, but his skill stagnates. The disciplined craftsman, however, humbles himself before the craft. He knows that every mistake is an opportunity to refine. Every piece of criticism is a tool to sharpen his ability. Over time, one builds walls to protect an image. The other builds mastery to embody substance. One is brittle. The other is unshakable. Ego inflates identity to make you feel powerful without effort. It seduces you into clinging to the illusion of superiority, but illusions don't survive contact with reality. Character, however, survives. Character is what remains when life strips away the applause, the titles, the recognition. Discipline makes you someone who doesn't just appear strong, but who is strong regardless of circumstance. And this distinction matters deeply because when you tie yourself to ego, you live in fear. You fear being exposed, being criticized, being overlooked. You fear anything that threatens the fragile story you tell yourself. But when you tie yourself to discipline, you are liberated from that fear. You know that criticism doesn't destroy you. It sharpens you. You know that failure doesn't define you. It refines you. You know that the image you present to the world isn't what matters. The character you are building day after day is what carries you through. You can see this in leaders. The leader ruled by ego needs constant recognition, constant reminders of their importance. They are insecure, and insecurity breeds poor judgment, resentment, even tyranny. The leader ruled by discipline doesn't care about being seen as great. They care about doing what is necessary, about fulfilling their responsibilities, about carrying the weight so others can stand tall. And when you look closely, you will notice something profound. The disciplined leader, the disciplined person in any field, often ends up earning far more respect and admiration than the one who demanded it through ego. Because respect is not granted to those who inflate themselves. It is granted to those who quietly, consistently prove themselves. So the choice stands before you. You can let ego inflate your identity, creating a fragile balloon that bursts the moment life presses too hard. Or you can embrace discipline, building character one act at a time, brick upon brick, until you become someone who cannot be easily broken. Identity may make you feel important in the moment, but character makes you unshakable for a lifetime. And only discipline can give you that. Ego fears failure. Discipline embraces it. That simple truth explains why so many people remain stagnant while a few continue to rise beyond the rest. Failure exposes the illusion that ego works so hard to protect. If your sense of worth is tied to appearing flawless, then failure is devastating. It isn't just a setback. It feels like a personal annihilation. You tell yourself, if I fail, then I am a failure. And that mindset is the very reason people avoid risk, avoid challenge, and avoid the very opportunities that could change their lives. Ego demands safety, not growth. But discipline looks at failure differently. Discipline accepts failure not as a verdict, but as a teacher. It understands that falling short is part of the process, that mistakes are feedback, And that the sting of defeat is an essential ingredient in eventual victory. Think of a child learning to walk. If that child had the ego of an adult, they'd give up after the first stumble. They'd say, this is humiliating. I can't let anyone see me like this. But children don't operate from ego. They operate from pure discipline of repetition. They fall 100 times, and yet they rise 101. Each fall is not a defeat, but a signal, a recalibration, an invitation to try again. And by embracing failure, they master walking. Adults forget this lesson. They learn to protect their ego instead of expanding their capacity. They avoid circumstances where they might fail because they want to look competent, respected, admired. But the irony is this: by avoiding failure, they avoid growth, and by avoiding growth, they eventually become exactly what they feared. A failure in the truest sense. Someone who never became what they could have been. In every meaningful pursuit, failure is unavoidable. The athlete loses games before they win championships. The entrepreneur launches products that flop before discovering what works. The writer produces pages of mediocrity before a masterpiece emerges. Ego cannot handle this reality. It interprets each failure as evidence of inadequacy. It whispers, see, you're not good enough. Stop now before anyone notices. But discipline doesn't attach identity to the outcome of one attempt. Discipline says, this didn't work, but I am not defined by this moment. I am defined by my willingness to keep moving, keep learning, keep refining. Consider the difference between two people confronting the same rejection. One submits a proposal, it's declined, and ego spirals into despair. They feel humiliated, unworthy, crushed. Their self-image can't survive the blow, so they retreat, avoiding future attempts. The other person submits the same proposal, faces the same rejection, but because they are guided by discipline, they dissect it. They ask, what did this fail? What can I adjust? What lesson is hidden here? And then they submit again, this time sharper, stronger, wiser. The ego-driven person sees failure as the end. The disciplined person sees failure as the path. This is why discipline produces resilience. Failure, embraced through discipline, loses its power to paralyze. Instead, it becomes a forge. The person who repeatedly fails and rises again becomes unbreakable. They stop fearing the sting because they know they can endure it. They stop fearing rejection because they've seen themselves bounce back stronger each time. Discipline transforms failure from a source of shame into a source of strength. Ego never allows for this transformation because it is too busy guarding appearances. There is a deep irony here. The very people who most fear failure are the ones who are enslaved by it. Their lives shrink, their risks diminish, their horizons narrow to do. They end up confined within a tiny, suffocating space where nothing new happens because ego has convinced them that staying safe is better than stumbling. The people who embrace failure, however, end up free. They try more, learn more, experience more. They fail, yes, but each failure expands their capacity. They grow not in spite of their failures, but because of them. If you study the lives of who achieve greatness, you will always find a mountain of failures behind their success. But if you study the lives of those ruled by ego, you find the opposite, a mountain of excuses, a graveyard of potential never realized because the fear of failure silenced them before they began. And that is the defining tragedy of ego. It kills possibility. Discipline resurrects it. So the real question is not whether you will fail, because you will. The real question is whether you will allow failure to define you or refine you. Ego chooses the first path. Discipline chooses the second. And in that choice lies the destiny of your entire life. Ego isolates, discipline connects. This is not an obvious truth at first glance, but if you look closely, you'll see it operating everywhere in human life. Ego thrives on the illusion of superiority. It tells you that you are above correction, above guidance, above the need for others. It whispers, you don't need to listen. You already know enough. You are the smartest person in the room, and in the moment, that lie feels empowering, but it quietly cuts you off from growth. It isolates you not only from others, but from reality itself. When you are consumed by ego, advice feels like an insult, critique feels like an attack, and collaboration feels like a threat to your importance. You surround yourself only with people who flatter you, who reinforce the image you want to believe. And in that echo chamber, you stagnate. Discipline functions in the exact opposite way. Discipline begins with humility, the recognition that you are not complete, that you are a work in progress, that there is much you do not know. That recognition doesn't weaken you. It strengthens you. It opens you up to the wisdom of others, to the knowledge of teachers, to the sharpening power of criticism. Discipline doesn't isolate. It connects. It draws you into networks of people who make you better, people who challenge you, people who will not let you stay the same. Discipline thrives in community because it recognizes that no one climbs to greatness entirely alone. Look at history's great minds. The most accomplished individuals were rarely isolated geniuses who refused to listen. They surrounded themselves with challengers, mentors, critics, rivals, and collaborators. The ego-driven person thinks, I don't need anyone else. The disciplined person understands, I can't grow without others. Ego builds walls, discipline builds bridges. One imprisons, the other expands. Think of the young employee who bristles every time his manager gives feedback. His ego says, they're undermining me. They don't respect me. He rejects advice. He distances himself from mentors, and slowly he stops improving. Compare that to the employee who listens, even when it hurts. Discipline allows her to see criticism not as a wound, but as a gift. Instead of isolation, she builds connections with mentors, with colleagues, with people who want to see her succeed. Over time, her capacity grows, and so do her relationships. The first employee ends up stuck, resentful, and alone. The second becomes capable, respected, and connected. That is the difference between ego and discipline. Ego isolates not only socially, but internally. When ego dominates, you become closed off even from your own potential. You cling so tightly to the self-image you've built that you won't explore parts of yourself that could make you stronger. Ego says, this is who I am, and I don't need to change. Discipline says, I am becoming someone more, and that requires openness. That openness leads to exploration, and exploration always leads to connection. With new ideas, new skills, new people, new worlds. Ego shuts doors. Discipline opens them. And this matters most when adversity comes. The ego-driven person, isolated in their pride, cannot call for help. They cannot admit weakness. They cannot lean on others when the weight becomes unbearable. So they collapse alone behind the walls they built. The disciplined person, however, has built bonds of trust through humility. They have listened, they have learned, they have served, and in return, they are surrounded by people willing to stand with them. They're disciplined to remain teachable and humble ensures they are not alone when the storm comes. Isolation is seductive because it gives you the illusion of independence, but it is an illusion. Humans are not built to thrive in isolation. Every breakthrough, every meaningful achievement, every act of transformation is deeply connected to others. Ego blinds you to this, tricking you into thinking that needing others is weakness. But discipline reveals the truth connection is strength. It is through discipline that you earn the trust, respect, and loyalty of others. It is through discipline that you gain access to wisdom greater than your own. The tragedy is that ego-driven isolation feels safe in the short term. You don't risk rejection if you don't open yourself up. You don't face critique if you don't listen. You don't feel vulnerable if you keep your walls high. But what you sacrifice is far greater than what you protect. You sacrifice the sharpening of iron against iron, the refining fire of collaboration, the growth that only comes through connection. Discipline asks you to risk vulnerability, to endure the discomfort of being challenged, to accept that you are not the ultimate authority. In doing so, it connects you not only to people, but to reality itself. So when you find yourself resisting feedback, dismissing advice, or withdrawing from those challenge you, ask yourself, is this really strength, or is it ego isolating me? And when you lean into critique, when you seek out mentors, when you embrace the discipline of humility, you discover a truth that ego could never deliver, that you are not weaker for needing others, you are stronger because of them. Ego dies with you, discipline outlives you. This is one of the most sobering truths you can confront about the way you live your life. Ego is obsessed with the present moment. The applause, the recognition, the status. It thrives on what others think of you right now, on how impressive you appear, on whether people admire your image. But when you die, all of that vanishes instantly. The spotlight turns off. The applause fades. The compliments disappear. Ego leaves no residue. It evaporates as quickly as it came. Discipline, however, plants seeds that grow long after you are gone. The fruits of disciplined effort, habits, works, virtues, institutions, and legacies become part of the fabric of reality itself. They outlive you because they are not about you. They are about the work, the structure, the truth you built through sacrifice. Think about the person obsessed with ego in life. They demand attention, they crave recognition, and they want to be remembered for how important they looked. But when they are gone, what remains? Perhaps some fleeting stories, perhaps memories of their arrogance, perhaps nothing at all. Contrast that with the person ruled by discipline. They may not have been loud. They may not have been the center of attention, but they built something, a family with values, a business that served others, a body of work that continues to inspire. Habits that ripple through generations. Discipline always leaves behind a trace. Ego never does. You can see this in art, in science, in leadership, in parenting. The disciplined artist who labors day after day, year after year, produces works that endure. Long after they're gone, those works continue to move people. The disciplined scientist who embraces the grind of study failure and experimentation leaves discoveries that shape humanity's future. The disciplined leader who carried responsibilities with integrity leaves behind institutions that guide people for generations. The disciplined parent who chooses sacrifice and consistency over indulgence raises children who embody strength, wisdom, and kindness. This is the legacy of discipline. It is quiet, steady, and enduring. Ego could never match it because ego is too fragile, too shallow, too temporary. When you look closely, you notice that ego is always about consumption, consuming recognition, consuming admiration, consuming the energy of others to inflate yourself. Discipline is about contribution. Discipline asks, what can I give? What can I build? What can I leave behind that others can stand upon? And because discipline contributes, it outlives the one who practiced it. Its impact multiplies, reaching beyond the boundaries of a single life. Ego shrinks down to nothing the moment the person is gone because ego never gave, it only took. This is why funerals are so revealing. Listen carefully when people speak about the dead. For the ego-driven, the stories are thin. People recall their pride, their demands, perhaps their image, but not much else. For the disciplined, the stories are endless. People speak of how they were shaped by that person's example, how their lives were changed by their guidance, how something they built continues to influence others. In the end, you see the truth ego dies with the body, but discipline endures in memory, in action, in legacy. And here's the paradox. Ego-driven people often chase immortality through fame, through being remembered. But fame is fickle. Today's celebrity is forgotten tomorrow. History is littered with once famous names that mean nothing to us now. Yet, disciplined individuals, many of whom never sought fame at all, continue to influence centuries later. Philosophers, inventors, reformers, writers, builders, teachers. Their disciplined commitment created ripples that outlasted them by generations. They weren't chasing immortality, but they achieved something close to it through the permanence of their discipline. You face this same choice every day. Will you spend your energy feeding ego what to do, grasping for recognition that will vanish the moment you do? Or will you spend your energy on discipline, quietly constructing something that will remain when you are gone? Discipline outlives you not because it glorifies you, but because it transcends you. It builds into the world something that others can inherit, something that does not collapse when your ego no longer has breath to sustain it. This is the ultimate test of meaning. Ego lives only for itself and dies with itself. Discipline lives for what is beyond the self, and because of that, never fully dies. When you are gone, your ego will be buried in the ground, but your discipline, your habits, your virtues, your sacrifices will echo in the lives you touched, in the works you created, in the foundations you laid. That is the only kind of immortality available to us. And it belongs only to those who choose discipline over ego,